We'll get started. I want to welcome you all for coming and being here for this internship information session. I'll take a minute now just to introduce ourselves. I am Wendy Geiker. I direct the Bridge program, and I also teach some coursework in the Bridge and mental health counseling program. Specifically, I teach a section of internship as well as psychopathology.
Hi everybody, I'm Monica Romane, and I'm the new clinical coordinator for the mental health counseling program and the advanced certificate.
Wonderful. So specifically, the format for tonight is we will be providing an overview of all different sorts of aspects of the internship, both related to the process of setting up a site, what makes a site a good one, all kind of hopefully areas related to the internship process, giving some information on that. After we provide you with our overview, we will leave plenty of time then for your specific questions. The format that we've made is sort of in a question and answer format, and so you'll see it from the top here. First, how do I find and set up an internship site? We want to impress upon you that the responsibility for identifying a suitable site is primarily on you. And it is because you are our Bridge students, and so we can't physically be where all of our Bridge students are. So for our online Bridge students, the onus really is primarily on you to identify an appropriate site in your given geographic area and to then begin the process of setting up the site. Most specifically, the way that our online Bridge students set up a site is the second bullet point here, is kind of creating a site that we haven't yet previously had a Bridge student at. Okay, so the process begins with the inquiry on your part to prospective sites. And so you would send an email or make some phone calls to set up an information gathering session with the prospective site. And we list here some of the key questions that we'd like you to look for in seeing if a site is a suitable mental health counseling internship site. First and foremost, we need the site to be an accredited agency that delivers mental health counseling services. The next point is around site supervision. So we would need the site to identify an individual who would be your site supervisor for the time that you are there. And the site supervisor needs to be qualified. In other words, that person needs to have either a master's or a doctoral degree with at least 3 years experience. In addition, that site supervisor needs to be licensed in mental health counseling. So the person needs to be either an LMHC, a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed psychologist, or some other equivalent licensure. We also need to have the site, and specifically the site supervisor, agree to provide a minimum of an hour a week of supervision with you. The site also has to agree to provide you with ample hours for the internship experience. The requirement for the internship experience is 600 hours, and roughly half of those 600 hours need to be direct contact with patients or clients. And we'll talk a little bit more about what direct and non-direct hours look like. But the big thing is that they need to be able to accommodate those hours required by the state for your internship experience. lastly, the site needs to be willing to set up an affiliation agreement, and that affiliation agreement is between the site and the University of Buffalo, and it basically is liability coverage. I'm going to pause here just to take a look at the chat to see a question from a student. So does the 1 hour a week of supervision have to be all in 1 hour, or could it all could it add up to 1 hour? I think ideally it would be in a one set sitting, but let me actually see, Monica, your thoughts on the supervision question.
Yeah, in general, because New York State has the requirement that you have 1 hour of direct supervision, New York prefers that it is that one set hour. I have seen sites who will split it in half and maybe do a couple of half-hour sessions, or do a half-hour of group and a half-hour of individual supervision at the site. You want to have that one-to-one time with your supervisor because things come up that you really need to process with them. A lot of site supervisors do walk-in supervision, so you might have a client in a really challenging situation and you want to process that with your supervisor and your supervisor just lets you walk in. That would be supervision in addition to that regularly scheduled supervision. Because you also want to document that on your hours logs. You want to show that you have completed the supervision requirement that New York State provides for in their requirements.
Wonderful, thank you, Monica, for that further clarification. Okay, so the next step, once you've gotten that information, and so far so good, the site looks like it would meet those requirements, then you complete a site approval form, which we refer to as Form 1. It's at this link here. It's an electronic form, and it just asks for some information about the site. It asks for the site's address, your identified site supervisor, and just a little bit more about the kinds of things that you anticipate that you'd be doing on that site, at that site. And we receive that Form 1, we review it, and if it is approved, then we notify you to then move on to the next step, which is here. And we call this step Form 2. So it's another electronic form, and by completing this form and submitting it, it begins the setup process of that affiliation agreement, which is a really, really important agreement that gets set up between your site and the University of Buffalo. So that Form 2 is what initiates that setup process. I should note that that Form 1 is completed by you as the incoming intern. Form 2, it can either be completed by you or by the site, whatever seems to make more sense given your specific situation. And you can click on the form and see the information that we do collect. I'd say in most cases the student just completes it, but sometimes the site, whether it be an HR office or a director of training or someone, will complete that for the student. And that affiliation agreement then requires signatures on both ends, both UB as well as your site. So sometimes that affiliation agreement setup process takes a little bit of time. So just keep that in mind as you're setting up your site, that you want to give yourself plenty of time for this paperwork signature gathering process to happen. In the meantime, though, you can do other parts to finish the process of getting it set up. These other parts include having your site supervisor sign a supervisor agreement form, basically detailing most of the things that we previously mentioned, just, that he or she is on board with providing supervision, providing ample office space, those kinds of things. Also, we have a document that just talks about the supervisor guidelines. And we also have an intern evaluation form that your site supervisor will complete both at the midway point, the 300-hour point, as well as the 600-hour point. So the midpoint and then the final evaluation at the end. And oftentimes we do encourage students to provide that to the site supervisor on the front end, just so that he or she is aware of the kinds of things that he or she will be looking for and evaluating you on throughout your internship experience. And when you're all set, then you'll let us know, and timing-wise, it will, the goal is for it to line up with the beginning of your internship semester so that you can begin then logging those hours at the start of the semester. Okay, so a little bit more about the breakdown of internship hours versus credits and all of that. So we use the equation of 50 contact hours to 1 credit of internship. And the internship must be 600 hours, and so using that equation of 50 hours to 1 credit, that comes out to be 12 credits of internship. And so with that said, you could complete all 12 credits of internship in 1 semester, because a semester is 15 weeks, and that would require you to complete internship hours about at the full-time kind of pace, so 40 hours a week. 40 hours times 15 equals 600, so there would be your 12 credits or 600 hours of internship. For many of our bridge students, completing internship across 2 semesters is the most feasible and ideal situation, which is 6 credits a semester, which equals 300 credits a semester, which breaks down to be about 20 hours a week of internship. Other students occasionally need to take less credits of internship than the typical 6 credit or 12 credit fashion, and that's okay too. So we just kind of work with you to identify what the proper kind of pace for internship hours and all of that would be, and it does come down to that equation of 50 hours to 1 credit. And the key is, like we said, to start the process early so that ideally you're able to be starting at your site at the start of internship, at the start of the semester. You're not able to start hours before the beginning of the semester. And specifically, you are actually not able to do anything directly with clients until you have the affiliation agreement fully executed and in place. I should say though, with that said, if there are aspects of your internship training, kind of the orientation process, if there's any sort of onboarding, any sort of shadowing, training that doesn't involve direct contact with clients, we are able to allow you to start that even beforehand, but in terms of direct contact, we cannot allow you to do that until the semester begins. So alongside your hours on site at your internship, you'll also then be concurrently enrolled in internship class. And it typically involves then roughly 90 minutes of collaborate classroom time. And so currently we're using this exact technology that you are all using right now. And it's a way then to not only receive peer supervision and university supervision from the internship instructor, it also includes different presentations related to your site, related to clinical treatments, and a case presentation at the end. that goes alongside with the internship hours you're accruing. We mentioned there is also an internship hours log that you'll keep, that you'll eventually submit at the end of the semester, as well as then the evaluation that's completed by your site supervisor both at the midpoint and at the end. Particularly for our bridge students, a question that often comes up is, can I do my internship hours at my current place of employment? Is this possible? And the short answer is that it depends, and it depends on a couple of factors. You do need to request permission for that to happen. So you do need to submit additional paperwork for that to be approved. And the things that we look for in that special approval request form is that we want to see that the hours at your place of employment that you will be counting toward internship are somehow unique and training focused compared to just your regular work duties. So perhaps it means that for your work hours that you'll log as internship hours, perhaps you'll be working with a new set of clients, or you'll have a different supervisor for your internship, or you'll be trying out a new treatment modality. So we really want you to be thoughtful with your supervisor ahead of time to really let us know that these hours are truly training centered and that you'll be doing something other than just your regular job. So we will then look for those things to be detailed in the special request form in order to receive approval to do that. So in order to determine if a site is an appropriate site to fulfill the mental health counseling internship requirements, we want it to align with what the New York State Office of Professions deems as an appropriate site. So it needs to be authorized as an agency that's providing mental health counseling services. Here we just copy and pasted the New York State Office of Professions definition of what mental health counseling is. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we'll talk a little bit more specifically about it here. Just a site supervisor needs to be properly credentialed. And so they can be a licensed mental health counselor, a licensed clinical social worker, psychologist, say psychiatric nurse practitioner, etc. And they need to have been in the field for at least 3 years. Another question that commonly comes up for our bridge students is, can I use previously accrued internship hours in my prior master's towards my required 600 hours of mental health counseling internship? And again, the short answer is it depends, and it depends on a couple of things. We use the guidelines that qualify an internship site to be appropriate for mental health counseling here. So sometimes a previous internship, say in school counseling or rehab counseling, does not fit the criteria for mental health counseling, either because the supervisor then isn't properly recognized as being credentialed for mental health counseling, or perhaps the duties that you performed on that previous internship don't fall under the umbrella of mental health counseling as recognized by New York State. So it is a process then for us to review to see if those hours can be counted toward mental health counseling internship. So we'd want to hear those things, and specifically we would ask for a previous course syllabi or syllabus of internship, as well as then site evaluations, internship hours log that let us know what it was that you were doing during those previous internship hours, etc. Let me see. I'm going to pause here just to answer the question that I'm seeing come up in the chat related to site supervisor credentials. So Jill's asking, does the supervisor need to have been licensed for 3 years prior to serving as your supervisor? And let me turn to Monica for your thoughts on this one.
So I don't believe that they actually have to be licensed for 3 years, but they have to have been practicing for 3 years. So what happens in our field a lot of times, because mental health counselors make great supervisors, so when you've been a licensed or a limited permit holder, and then you gain your license, you get promoted to supervisor. So typically you've been working for 2 to 3 years once that happens. Same thing for social workers. By the time they receive their LCSW, the clinical piece, they've been working in the field for a few years. So my understanding is that that would count for New York State. But as long as they're licensed, I think sometimes people get confused on the LMSW, but it definitely has to be a licensed clinical social worker.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So sometimes our students completed a previous master's here at UB, and they're curious if we still have records of those hours. And typically we hold on to records for 7 years. So if you did complete hours or coursework outside of that time frame, then it is quite possible that we no longer have those records and that we would actually be asking you then to provide documentation of those previous hours. Okay, so we anticipate that the reason why you're here with us tonight is that you are possibly anticipating beginning internship this spring. So we don't yet have the registration number for that course, but it will be posted soon, actually, if it's not already. And so you would just register for that course. You would do a calculation of how many hours you anticipate on doing that spring and choose the number of credits that corresponds with that. It is tricky. It is one of the few courses in your program of study that there is an option of variable credit. And if you don't use the drop-down menu to add the course, it defaults to 1 credit. We try to catch that, particularly before the add drop period ends, but just let this be kind of a heads up that there is a drop-down option to choose the number of credits that best fits your situation. And as I said, the course then uses this technology, and so it has weekly meetings in real time, and students tend to really like that, to have this interaction with peers as well as with the instructor in this real-time kind of fashion. Let's see. I will pause. I like the questions that are coming in, so let's see where we are with those. So Christina, you've asked, New York State had approved my practicum and then said that I have to be evaluated by UB if the 700 hours I completed could be approved or half of them. Can I submit the same form I submitted to New York State? It depends what you did have to submit to New York State. So we can work with you to tell you what to submit to us so that we can review it and then let you know the outcome. I will say though, with your question just about total hours, that reminds me of an important point, is to say that the maximum number of internship hours that we allow to be transferred in is 300. So even if you completed 600 or more hours previously, the most we're able to approve is half of those. So after this session, you can email or contact Monica with as follow-up to this, to then kind of begin that review process to see if and how many hours could be possibly transferred in. Right, yeah. So even if then we're able to waive or transfer in the maximum number, which is 300, that would still require then 300 additional hours through the UB internship course and setup process. Okay. Yes. Yep. So long as it meets all those other requirements, particularly the site supervision piece. Yeah. And then Heather asks another question about, can we take internship while taking other classes? Yes, for sure. Many of our students do. I say also though, some students take internship as their final course, and so that sometimes is the only course students are taking toward the end of their program. Okay, let's see. Christina, will I still register for internship and for how many credits? Yes, you would still need to be taking the internship course. Anytime anyone is clocking internship hours, they need to be concurrently enrolled in internship class. And if say you are approved for 300, that means you would take 300 more. And if you're able to do it all in one semester, then for that semester you would take 6 credits of internship because of the equation that we use of 50 hours to 1 credit. Okay, so in terms of a deadline, I think some of these slides here will give you a better sense of time frame. I would say that it's never too early to start the process. So you, after tonight, you can begin the process, which would, the first step often then is, if you already have a site identified, is to complete the electronic Form 1. That link was provided on this slide, and after this session, we can make these slides available to the participants that were here this evening. Okay. Great. Yeah, so we can provide you with the links after the info session, and we may even be able to just pull them and copy them into the chat. That's also, I think, a good idea that we can try to do before we close. That's correct. Okay, so when do I have to secure a site by? So this gets a time frame or a timeline. So you need to have everything set up by the start of internship class. So spring internship starts the end of January, and so like I said, you can literally start the process now, and it starts with Form 1. Once we approve your site, then you can move on to Form 2, and like I said, that's the affiliation agreement setup process, which can take time, and also the factors that contribute to getting those signatures are oftentimes out of our control. And so while you're waiting for those signatures to go back and forth, you can also start doing those other setup steps, which means, which include then giving your site supervisor the agreement and having them return it to you, to us, or directly to us, providing your site supervisor with the guidelines as well as the evaluation form. So, you know, you can kind of time it out, kind of work backwards, knowing that it has to all be kind of set up by the start of the spring semester. Am I required to stay at the same site for the whole internship requirement? Ideally, yes. Obviously, if there is something that comes up that makes it sensible for you to discontinue your internship, we can work with you to set up a new one. And that does happen every now and again. However, we do encourage students to try to complete all of their internship hours at the same place, and it's primarily a feasibility thing. Because the process of setting up a new site does take time, we wouldn't want to slow down the rate of completion of the program. Of my total internship hours, how many of them need to be direct client contact? We use a rule of thumb of approximately half of those hours we would like to see be direct contact. And you will be recording all of these things in your internship hours log. But just to speak very briefly about what is a direct contact hour versus indirect, we provide this helpful slide here. The left-hand side, we see direct service hours, which are what we would probably intuitively kind of think of direct contact, you know, individual counseling hours, group counseling hours, family, couples work, any sort of assessment or initial intake kinds of things, crisis work. Those all are direct service, where on the right-hand side we see hours that can count and be logged but are indirect or non-direct service hours. That's anytime you spend receiving supervision, writing up notes, reviewing charts, anything like that can still be logged, but it would be under the category of non-direct service hours. So we look for the ratio of these hours to be about 50-50. I think we already answered this question as it came up in the chat, that you can, yes, be taking courses concurrently with internship. And it typically is the last courses that you need. So perhaps it is the assessment course, the 586 course, or psychopathology or something like that. Okay, so at this point, I think we've completed the information that we pre-prepared to share with you, and we have plenty of time to continue to answer your specific questions. I see that the chat has had some activity, so let me get caught up with that. Okay, so yes, Form 1, Christina, is the first step, and that will, once we approve your site, then you would move on to Form 2. We can provide you with the site supervisor agreement document as well. You also ask, yes, yep, if it is a new job, and so it would be new training, that is possible then for it to count for internship. And we just would ask that you further kind of delineate that in the special request form. And lastly, we'll begin an outline of the courses we can or have to take in the spring. So yes, so basically, if you have your list of courses that are still required for you to take in your program of study, you can look at the list of spring offerings. I don't know off the top of my head if that list is available at this moment or if it will be soon. And you can just kind of plug in based on your availability and course availability what makes sense for you to be taking in the spring. Yep. So I'm hopeful that that the courses you need will be offered this spring. I feel like we've done an excellent job of offering courses both in the fall and the spring. So I don't know your program of study specifically off the top of my head, but we can certainly review it and see if they are indeed offered. Okay, let's see here. my computer froze there for a moment. Okay. So what other questions do classmates have? I'm going to try to pull up those links to be able to paste them into the chat. So bear with me here while I try to do that.
So Heather, while Dr. Geiker is doing that, I see your question, are most internships paid or is it depending on the agency? So generally, internships are not paid. If you are one of the people who is able to work at your site, those hours may or may not be paid by your site. So those are things that you have to talk with your place of employment about. I've certainly worked with students who did their placements at their place of employment and were not paid for the extra hours that they did while that counted for their placement time. Other places have been generous and have paid their employees/interns for internship time. So it really just depends on where you are and what the legal mumbo jumbo each agency uses to kind of cover those types of experiences. So you really have to check with the place of employment to see how that works.
Great, and I have pasted the links to forms 1 and 2 into the chat, so hopefully you can grab those from there, because I do see that you probably weren't able to copy them from the slides themselves. All right. What are other questions that you might have about the process or about a site? It looks like there may be some chat activity, so we'll stay here to see if there are some remaining questions. But in the meantime, too, I have turned to this slide, which has both mine and Monica's contact information. And I would say oftentimes the first way of contacting us, I think, and Monica, you can say to your preference, is email. Because we're not in our offices all of the time, sometimes email contact is the best first way to go, and then from there we can go to further either setting up a phone call or a meeting.
Yep, I totally agree.
Great. Okay, so let's see. Let's see here. Christina, you've written in the chat, if my job is not listed in your internships, but something very close is there. Yeah, so I don't even, I'm not sure what you're referring to in terms of a list of internships. Because I don't know if such a list actually exists at this time. But in terms of what you've written so far about your site, it does look from the little that I can see that you know it's an accredited agency and that it provides mental health counseling services. So yeah, definitely the information that we ask for in that Form 1 will help us then determine if in fact the site seems suitable. Also, let's see, Heather, I saw a list of available places on the course for this. Again, I actually am not sure what that document is. Yeah. Monica, do you have a sense of this document?
I have to say I'm not sure, so I'm taking a quick look to see. Was it on the advisement page, Heather? Is that the one that you're talking about? I'm not sure.
Okay, it's under internship guide. So let us take a look. We're actually in the process of updating that internship guide, so we may not be completely aware of the current guide or that list, because I don't know off the top of my head what that is. So let me take a look. Okay. Ah, okay. So I think it's the document that says possible internship sites. Is that what you mean? Hmm. So it looks like at some point all of our existing affiliation agreements was compiled into a list, which is what has been posted. So that does give you a nice sampling of the kinds of sites that our students are interning at. And so oftentimes our bridge students are looking to do internship at a site that isn't yet listed on that site. As I said, we are a relatively new bridge program, so that list is just continuing to grow, but it also means that oftentimes students are setting up our very first affiliation agreement between a site and the University of Buffalo. But so I don't think you need to worry that if you don't see your site on that list. And again, I would just say to go ahead and complete the Form 1 and the fields in that form that we ask for, and we'll assess the appropriateness of the site from that information there. Okay, let's see. Jill asks a question about students who intern there found someone in a location outside of New York that just happens to be licensed in New York, because doesn't the supervisor have to be licensed in New York? Let's see, Monica, I'm going to defer to you on this one. Okay.
Yeah, I think that might be for our students who live outside of New York. So we do get students from other states in our bridge program. So some of those sites with affiliation agreements are with those types of sites. So that might be what you're seeing. So for those students, of course, the person would not have to be licensed in New York. They have to be licensed in the state where the student is residing, and meet those state requirements as well as New York state requirements.
Great. All right. Great. So it looks like, Christina, it sounds like we'll be doing some follow-up in terms of determining credits and next steps with setting up your site, so that sounds good. Any other questions at this time? Yep, great. So Christine, it looks like we'll follow up offline in terms of just looking at spring, looking at internship, and looking at what courses fit your program of study with the with your spring plan. All right. Well, if there aren't any further questions at this time, I think it's a good place to close the kind of conversation for now. But you have our information here, and now perhaps then you have faces with our names, which is great, and same with you all. And yeah, so we just look forward to kind of continuing to facilitate this process with you, and for some of you, perhaps then I'll see you in internship class, depending on the section. And Monica and I both are just here to help you along the way. And so thank you again for joining us this evening.
Thank you, everyone.